This is the Educational Triage Podcast. Welcome. We invite you to come along with us on an exploration of interviews, issues, and other exciting and relevant topics in education, especially alternative education. They say alternative education is a laboratory for mainstream education. Why? Well, join us every week and listen in as Philip Summers
Aloha.
and I, Tony Hunt, jump in feet first to discuss issues that may affect our classes, students, communities, as well as our teaching. Please subscribe if you enjoy and find relevance in what you experience here. And if you haven't left a quick review, please do. We appreciate your candor and insights so we can improve as we move forward. Now, let's see what's on board today. Hey everybody, welcome back to Educational Triage. This is Tony, and I have the wonderful Philip
Aloha. Good to see you.
alongside with me. Hey, before we get going, make sure that you hit that notification bell, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, and also leave us a review and put something in the comments section. It helps with the algorithm, whether you're podcast or whether or not you're YouTube. So this week we are talking about what doesn't mainstream, what don't districts, what don't people understand about alternative ed?
Yeah.
Why do they? I suppose the question is,
Why?
why do they want to fix alternative ed when it ain't broke?
Oh, that's well put. Yeah, why does everyone want to fix alternative ed? And when they don't know anything about it,
They don't ask questions.
yeah.
And what they'll do, here's what
Yeah.
they'll do. They'll go to somebody who they think is smart, and they will ask them, tell me about alternative ed. And that person has never even been to a conference. They've had absolutely no training or anything. They were just dumped in the job. They were told to run with it, and they don't even want to be there.
Yeah,
They'd rather do something else. And so they make it a less than priority for themselves, which is not what alternative ed should be.
I think it goes a little further too. It's almost like there's some of those topics where we have a sort of an opinion about, generally speaking. In education, of course, you're thinking alternative education. I'm an educator. I should maybe know some about this. And they don't know anything really, but they use a little bit of conjecture, a little bit of, their experience and their knowledge. They put it together and come up with an opinion when they never investigated. They didn't actually learn what alternative ed was, just relied on what they think it is and was.
It's
and
all
then,
based on vapid assumptions.
Yeah, it's based on a lot of assumption, a ton of it. And I didn't know anything about alt ed before I got accidentally hired into it. Basically, I was going to teach careers. It was actually sort of a different sort of thing. But yeah, I had no idea. And I had such a no idea that I didn't understand like what the mainstream was doing a lot of times with, certain things like textbooks and PAT curriculum and things, because we were just flying with our curriculum. It was, we were having a good time.
I think you and I were talking, and I think a lot of it has to do with control.
Yeah. I think
they cannot control what they cannot control, or what they don't understand. They don't feel as though they can control it. And so they want this whole system of compliance. They want something where they can, okay, let's take, for example, because I was telling you about a conversation I was having about the number of hours. So I was asked, how do you meet the number of hours that a student needs to be committed to a certain coursework in order to get the credit? So, for example, to get a half a credit, they need to have 30 hours of instruction.
Okay.
And
so it's been said.
I said, well, we're alternative education. We have all sorts of venues in order to get there. We have self-directed projects. We
Mhm.
have packets that they can use. We can go online. We have all sorts of ways,
Yeah.
but you cannot take that kid. An alternative kid is a triangle or a round kid
Yeah.
or an octagonal kid. And you're
Octagonal.
trying to put them into this tiny wee square box.
Yeah, you're trying to pound them through the square part on the top, and they're not gonna
And it's
fit.
just not going to work for
It
them.
hurts them
And
too.
so we take them and we say, "Hey, let's figure out the best way for you to learn." So it's an IEP, except
Yeah,
it's
it
more of
is.
an LILP, an individualized learning program
Yeah.
for
I,
each one of those students. So when they come through the door, we look for the best way that they can learn. And how are they going to learn? And we have to fill in the gaps as well.
yeah, yeah. It's the
And
same standard, though. I may add, and it's assumed, but we should point this out specifically. Those standards that we're shooting for are the same standards that the kids are
right.
getting at the regular high schools. Yeah. So we're
Mhm.
covering that. We're just not covering it in the traditional third period history way.
Right. And a student may move at either a faster,
Hmm.
a slower, or at the same pace as their peers in that
Hmm.
same class. I mean,
Oh,
it
yeah.
there are many factors that go in there
Yeah.
because we're looking at the kids' environment that is outside of the school.
Yes.
We're
Yeah. Yeah.
looking at the students' abilities. We're looking at the students' past. I mean, every
I'm
student has their own story.
I'm looking for their interests first and foremost because I can get to almost anything if some through some interest. You
Hmm.
know, skateboarding. I mean, talk about angles and degrees and then skill and fitness. I mean, it's if you can hook a kid through that, you can teach an entire range of topics
Let
and
me
they're
come back to
interested.
skateboards with you.
Oh, oh, ouch. Every time I think of a skateboard, I hurt myself. Those guys are
but
good, but they go
but
down a lot.
but basically the student feels noticed, they feel heard, they feel like
Yeah.
somebody is actually looking out for them and they build that relationship.
And they're focused on it because they like it. It's like, well, now that I want to learn about.
And if they're frustrated and they can't do something about it one day, let's say that Philip comes into class and Philip is having troubles and Philip's had a really rotten night. I mean, all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff may have happened to Philip.
Yeah.
We're not going to go into any war stories here, but we need to take care of Philip because if we can take care of Philip, then Philip will continue to come back and Philip will continue to learn with us. And we don't want to lose him. And so we build that relationship because, as I've said with every one of my programs, we are a family. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that because I had a principal who kept saying, "We are a family, people. We are a family."
Team.
And 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 we weren't even a team.
Yeah, they
It was if we were
family.
a family, we might as well have been like bandidos, all separated all around the world, trying to build our own empires, you know?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
it
we
made
were like
absolute
the European families.
he just liked to throw that word around. And I finally came to the point where somebody stopped me from looking at him the last time that he said, "We are a family," and calling him daddy.
Call him daddy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just thought that made as much sense as him saying family. So anyway, but
It's true.
if we are supposed to adhere to the exact same rules and regimentation as the mainstream classroom,
What's the difference? Sorry. I
then
just filled in the blank.
then then
Yeah,
then get the oops program out of there. I mean, you have
right.
no right to have an alternative program in your district or your school.
Yeah,
That is not what alternative ed is.
yeah,
And if you cannot find the information and you go to somebody and they tell you what they think it is because they're well educated, that doesn't mean anything.
yeah,
You
that's
need
true.
to go to find the right person. I had somebody
Yeah.
come to me and they said, what is this thing that we have to do in our building now? Because we had an alternative ed director who thought he knew what was going on, told me that there was nobody in the Department of Education that was working with alternative ed, and just all this weird stuff. And I made some phone calls and I spoke to other people at other districts, and they said, yeah, there is. There are
Mm-hmm.
people down there in the Department of Ed who work directly with the alternative ed
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
departments and schools and administrators. And I got in touch with them and we talked. And just as I thought, the rules that I knew that were in place, because I worked on the board of alternative ed for the state organization for several years. And he and I spoke, and I said, okay, are you willing to take phone calls? I had to go to building principals. I had to go to the administrators at the district office and explain it to them. I had to talk to HR. I could not believe what I had to tell people. And yet they still couldn't get it. And I had them call this guy. And so they called him, then they called me for follow up, and they said, how do you know so much? And I said, how long have I been in this district and how long have I taught alternative ed? And they said, well, quite some time. And I said, do you not think that I don't know alternative ed and the laws? Granted, I did have to go in with my cohort who I was working with at the time, and we went looking for it because she knew that it existed as well.
Yeah.
These laws that said that this guy was completely off his rocker. But I think that sometimes you have people who have a little bit of information, and those are the most dangerous people because they will screw everything up for everybody else.
I think you're right.
And so now they have a director of alternative ed who doesn't know what he's talking about.
Mm-mm.
They have, I'm not talking about the Department of Ed, I'm talking about the district. They have people who are in there who say that they are alternative ed and they're anything but.
Mm-hmm.
You have people who are too afraid to say anything. And the whole thing is, I think you and I talked about it earlier, and I said, sometimes programs have a shelf life, possibly.
Yeah.
And this is what happens. This is what happens to them.
Somewhere in my research, I'll have to look this up. Get my assistant to do that. I discovered, and maybe we'd even said this, that generally speaking, programs last about 2 to 3 generations at the most before they break down. And I didn't know that. I thought, we could build this and build this and build this. Upward we go. And they kind of get the 2 and then they break down. And that's what happened in the case of myself is we were really humming. I mean, nationally recognized, kind of under the radar. People come visit us, see how we did it. It was really simple to explain too. Relationships, rigor, and relevance, basically. And that just kind of went away over the years. And now there's an awful lot of like online learning. And I did 3 years of that. And that's only desperately needed. Only needed in desperate cases, rather. I mean, it's not real good. I never felt good about it after I'd administered it for about a semester. I went, this is not, this is patchwork at best. It's certainly not an education, and it's not alternative education because anybody can log in and do it. So,
yeah. I had kids who later told me that they had one of their relatives do the work for them.
Oh, you see, oh goodness, I thought of that. You pay somebody to write your paper, pay somebody to take your class. They're not there to see it. They just assume somebody won't take $100 to take your history class.
And somebody said, well, they need to have their diploma taken away. And I said, nah, I'm not going to. I mean, you put them in that position where you told them that they had to learn this way. And they said, I can't get it this way. And we were trying to figure out another way to do it.
Yeah.
And you came down and said, Absolutely not. They will do what we tell them to do.
That's the
I
origin
mean,
story of alternative ed. That's
I
it.
mean, it was the ultimate diktat,
Yeah, it was
you
like that's
know?
why we have alternative eds. Like I said, I can't do the work this way, and they're gonna innovate. Duh.
And this was from somebody
Yeah.
who had been who had experienced alternative ed as a high school student.
What? They didn't learn. Ooh, that's a thing. You think
I
people
hate
are
to say it,
learning
Philip.
and they don't.
Philip, I hate to say it, but it's one of your former students.
Oh no. I've had nightmares about that because the whole reason I set out to teach was to kind of
Mhm.
erase stupid from the world. Now, I wasn't ever doing it with my opinions. I wasn't going to say vote this way or do this, but I was going to just present information and say, yeah, and here's the reality of some information, and here's the information, know where to put it in the context of life. And whatever you do, don't be stupid. You can be ignorant and fix that, but just don't be willfully stupid. and
Well, I think some people, once they get a little taste of
I
power,
think, yeah,
I think that their brains kind of, I don't know where their brains go. I really don't.
I don't
I
think
think that they just, yeah,
you don't
I
have it in
don't
your
think
head. I
so.
don't think to where it goes. I don't think you have that. I know I
I
don't
think you lose sight.
have
Here's what it is. And I think,
that.
we talked with Joe about this, Joe McQueen
Yeah,
from Calming Young Minds.
yeah,
And I think we also talked with Tara Garcia Mathewson about this. And it is, if you don't have the student's best interest at heart from the very beginning,
mm. Yeah.
you don't belong in education.
That's the truest test. You're right. If that's not the primary thing
Now,
you have,
now
yes,
you
yeah.
cannot be overly empathetic. I
No,
mean,
no, no. We're not.
you have to have lines.
Yeah. An intelligent interest in helping kids, period. I mean, and you happen to be in education because that's what we chose. We could have gone into coaching or social work, but we chose education. We thought it was a
Right.
one-on-one
It's a
way.
vocation.
Yeah, like I said, I thought I got kids out of high school. At least don't be stupid. You can make mistakes and get out there. You can be ignorant, and build on it, but just don't be intentionally dumb. I used to rail on them because we talk about things like Florida man, puts head in alligator's mouth, and guess what happened, kind of stuff. That's stupid, you guys. That's a prime
Well,
example of it, extreme.
what kills me is the fact that they talk about how they don't have the money for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And they spend the money on programs that they say are helping our students. Well, the programs are not helping our
Well, they
students,
don't.
first of all.
Yeah, well, they just would if
And
you do it the
and
way they said you should do
and
it.
they're I mean, they're spending millions of dollars doing these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And they're not using their teachers. In fact, what they've done is they have relegated the teachers to a paraprofessional
Oh,
because the
yeah.
teachers are no longer teaching. All they're doing is monitoring.
They'll actually hire paraprofessionals in place of teachers. They say there's a teacher shortage, but they don't hire them. Strange.
Well, they lower the requirements for them.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So they say that teachers are important. However, we're going to skip the training and we're just going to put people in there. We're going to tell them what to do. One state decided they were going to have the National Guard or Army or whoever, people in the reserves come in and they were going to teach. And those people just threw their arms up and just left because they said, no way, I can't control these.
So
Because there's more to teaching than just crowd control.
Well, who's controlling education? I mean, what's education for then? Who's supposed to benefit?
That's a great question. Who is controlling education?
I would say the shareholder, the omnipotent, shady, vacuous, sort of vaporous shareholder, the prime dollar. And we've just adapted it to the public sector instead of the private sector.
You just called the government a corporation.
I did, and I intentionally did so because I think we've become a corporation, the United States of America Incorporated. Government for the government, government for corporations, by corporations, and of corporations. Period. Everyone behave like you're a part of a corporation, including the public sector.
I will agree.
Yeah, that's what I think's driving it. No one, like you said, the prime thing, us dumb teachers are there for the kids. Administrators are there for the corporation.
Right. Administrators are there for the grift.
They're there. They're there for the corporation. They're running the ship. The ship
I
is
will
not
say,
a good ship.
I will, and we can't speak for all administrators. There are some very, very good administrators around.
Absolutely. Yeah, but the whole
Wonderful ones,
system that,
like Joe McQueen.
yeah, that's true. There are great administrators who are trying to break it down, but they're really swimming upstream against a heavy duty current. It's just wow.
And we did that 2-part series on rating your school district in your schools.
Wow, yeah, that was fun.
And so those are things, and if you take a look at those are things that you can look at to see whether or not your district actually cares about the kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
A lot of districts are worried about graduation rates. There was a kid who I worked with, and they put me in charge of him because they didn't know who else to give him to.
Oh, I've had that.
because he needed to learn how to work on his reading and comprehension because he was at a sub first grade level.
How old's this kid?
The kid was a junior at the time.
Oh, wow.
Sweetest kid in the world.
I'm just thinking about all the work.
But he hardly ever showed up. And I was to do it all online.
What?
It was going to be part of this online curriculum that they had given us to work with.
And they didn't give you a magic
and they
wand.
Said, and so he would go in there and he would do his work.
Huh.
And nobody worked with me. I made multiple phone calls to try to figure out what was going on in this whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
And the next thing I know, the next year, the kid looked at me and he goes, "Guess what?" And I said, "What?" He said, "I'm graduating." I said, "That's great." I said, wait a minute. Are you reading now? And he said, "Kind of. People read to me." And I said, "What about the writing part?" And he said, I just dictate to the computer. And then people help me fill in the dots. Literally, people help me fill in the dots, meaning periods and the punctuation.
Yeah, the dots.
So he graduated because the district was more desperate for him to graduate than they were for him to actually get the type of education that he required in order to be successful.
I can tell you, if you have a kid reading that low, it's a huge monumental task to bring them up.
It can be done, but you can't do it in one semester, and they have to be consistent.
No, God, no.
They have to be consistent.
They have to be consistent. Hard work, and you can bring that up to a pretty 8th grade level-ish kind of thing. Maybe if they're good at it and they just never tried, then wow, I like reading and writing. It's good. It's like, yeah, see, maybe you should come to school. That's usually what it was. They didn't go to school. They just found ways to stay away from doing stuff for years.
I think in his circumstances, it had something to do with family. Had to do with poverty. It had to do with all the moving, everything.
There's a lot of ways it happens.
Right. And he was a great guy. He really was a great guy. But he gets the same piece of paper that says that he can read and write and do arithmetic.
Well, and then people will say, people are being sent out of high school and they don't even know how to read and write. And I take exception to that because I've never had that happen myself with a student. But yeah, apparently it does. And it does make us look terrible. I mean, you can't give somebody that basic proficiency level diploma and then they don't have the basic proficiency.
But those are the anomalies. Those are the exceptions to the rule. I mean, for the most part, most
Yeah.
people, most students, they are they're pretty well versed. I had lunch the other day with a former student, and we were talking, and he said, I don't remember anything that we did in class. I said, really?
Yeah.
He said, all I remember is that you made us write a lot. And he said, but what I also remembered was that you read to us. And so we didn't have to do a whole lot of reading when we went home.
Mhm.
But you tried to work with us so that we got all of our work done in the classroom. You tried to keep us from having to do homework. But
Yeah.
he said, but I really didn't care. And then on one of my papers, you wrote, you can do so much better. This is not a reflective work of what you're capable of doing. And he said that that was the one thing that started a fire in his belly. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, nobody had ever told me that before. Nobody had ever seen any potential in me. Nobody had done anything for me. And I said, oh my gosh. I said, because you do really well now. And he said, well, yeah, because you made me write those papers and you made me do well. And you weren't going to accept second best from me.
Right.
And I said, thank you. That's one of the highest compliments you could pay me.
I would say, yeah.
But, all I did was I took alternative education tenets and brought them into a mainstream classroom.
Yeah. Go figure. And they worked.
For the most part, they did.
Yeah.
But because you always have the one-off,
I can give you an example of it not working. Here's a good one.
Okay.
So I'm the alternative ed guy. When I do sub jobs, it's getting to the point now where at least one or two students will walk into every classroom and go, hey, it's you, and they like seeing me. And I like that. I like being seen. My standard is to do what's usual and customary. That is, if you need to pass to the bathroom, take the pass, do work. If you're not going to do work, don't disrupt other folks and make your deadlines, your teacher, things like that. Okay. It works out in the classroom. When I do PE, it's insane. I can't control a PE class very well at all. I mean, they're rude. They curse like crazy. They're all over the place. And it's like, and the coach that, I'm working with wants everyone to keep moving. It's PE. Be walking, anything. Don't sit down. And I'm like, I don't nag people. It's like, oh, this is not working. And I actually tell people, listen, I know this is awkward, but it's PE. You got to keep moving. And I've explained to a lot of people, the reasoning. The point is this: PE class is sort of absurd. The whole structure of having to wait, at 9:10 in the morning, we will do something for 55 minutes or 50 minutes, and do it. Keep moving. You must move. Keep moving. This is PE. That's how you get your credit. And it's like, and then I started talking to kids, and I said, okay, do you do anything outside of PE? And he goes, oh yeah, I'm a dancer. Oh, I'm in cheer. I play soccer. I go, what would you say you cheered more than like 4 hours a week? Oh yeah. We were there after it. We're practicing an hour after school and a couple on the weekends. I'm going, okay. And now you have to come to PE and pretend to be physical to get your credit. The whole system is, and they know it. And they just rebel like crazy against it.
Well, it depends, because I remember when I was in high school and we had PE.
Yeah.
We loved PE. We went down there because we just had the best time.
You're one of those guys. I have kids sneaking into my class. You don't belong in this period. Get out. I don't need extra students. It's so weird. Yes, you're one of those kids. It's wonderful.
Well, no, I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one.
No, there's a group.
And the reason was because back in those days of the covered wagons,
square balls,
we had to let out steam somehow or other. Yeah. And we got to play soccer. We got to play basketball. We got to play baseball. Yeah. We got to go running. We got to do all kinds of stuff. We got to play dodgeball.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were cruel with those balls. We really slammed them. But the thing is if you take how many of those kids are actually active? Think about, I mean, you
Oh,
talk to
I'm
some,
not going to argue that PE, I think PE is important. What I was pointing
it
out though, like
it's
every day, sort of at 9 to 10 something, you will be doing PE. The kids are like, they
well, the
rebel against
question
that
is,
system big time.
how do you structure the class then
Yeah.
so that kids want to be there and they can participate?
That would be that. I thought to myself, if this was not a kind of a long-term, little short-term, long-term sub job at PE,
Hmm.
I would definitely have something that was interesting. I would go out of my way to figure out what we could get that would everyone would dig on. And that's the alternative me. But since I'm not being able to do it and I'm kind of being told keep moving, it's like this whole system is like really hard to work under. It's kind of absurd.
And I would say you could have like a dance studio at one point,
Oh yeah.
but wait.
What?
I chaperone school dances. You got to chaperone that room,
Oh well,
the way that they dance.
yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
would definitely, yeah. I mean, we wouldn't, yeah. I would be present. I wouldn't go, you guys, here's the video, have at her. In fact, I like to learn with them. I shot
Yeah.
so many basketballs in the last 3 days, and I swear to goodness, they hit the rim like in the back and the front, rolled in and went out, rolled out and went in. I mean, it's like nothing went down. It was like I was the best example of how to gracefully shoot badly. but I was learning how to do it. And they're going, you're almost getting it, Summers? I go, no, I'm still not getting it. It's like, it's fun stuff. I would definitely, I told a couple of kids that if it was my class, we would have some really cool stuff to do. I would go out of my way to make it interesting.
The interesting thing about kids, even in high school,
Yeah.
sure, you're going to have, and I keep saying this, you're going to have that one,
Or two.
or two, but they're really little kids at heart.
Yeah.
And so you can read them things like Miss Nelson is missing. That can be a perk for them to do really well
yeah.
for a day. If they do really well for 1 week, you read them a story on Friday. If
Let them play their music.
and they love that stuff.
In the gym, there's an audio system. Let them play their music. Okay, it's your day. Tomorrow's your day. Pick a good playlist.
Yeah.
Because it really feels, there's something good feels like, oh, that's my music and banging in the gym. I like this. Yeah. Kids like that.
How do you empower the students?
Exactly.
What are you doing that comes along with what they want? But if you are in a mainstream classroom teacher mentality, and I'm not going to say that I've never been guilty of this, but you go in there and you become authoritarian. A lot of teachers rule with
authoritarian style versus authoritative, which is a respect earned.
Or even as a mentor, a guide.
Yeah. That's even more involved.
Where the students come in and you talk to them and they feel as though, this is kind of a group thing that's going on.
Yeah.
And it's not the sage on the stage.
The sage on the stage. I like that. It's not about just one.
And what's really interesting is I was going through my Twitter. I think it was Twitter. I don't
Something
remember
bad
which one
for
it
your
was.
health.
Well, it's interesting. Somebody it was Twitter, and it was this principal who I kind of follow, and he had just come back from a Kagan workshop. Kagan Cooperative Learning. Some people might say my kids would never do that because they are too advanced for that. Guess what? Adapt it. If you cannot adapt your materials to fit your class to make it more exciting and more integral and do things with it, then move your butt out the door, because it doesn't matter who you're teaching. If kids don't see the relevance, if you're not adapting, if you're trying to punch those shapes through that little square, it ain't going to work. And so cooperative learning actually works so well, and you learn it, they learn it, and so it's a learning process. But in the
Yeah.
process of doing it, you become a team, and so it's like
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
whole community that's doing the same thing. And he was talking about how wonderful it was, and so part of me was thinking, you know what, kind of feel like I need to reach out to them and talk to them,
Yeah.
because I think that this is a wonderful time for a resurgence of cooperative learning techniques.
It'd be
I mean,
nice.
seriously.
I was hoping that after the pandemic things might change, but it appears to me that schools are doubling down on the old structure. They're really desperately trying to
And they're doing
install the
it
old one.
so
They're
badly.
doing it terribly. Everyone's trying
They don't
so
know what
hard.
they're
They
doing.
don't. They don't, and it's really interesting. It's putting out little fires everywhere. You know, have you seen this student? They're skipping that, this. You know, instead of asking why is that student skipping? Why is that student? How is it the student can walk into other people's classrooms? That's a new one to me. I'm teaching and someone walks into some kid that's not in my class just walks in and starts talking to one of my students. Like, hello. This is some of the
Well,
school
that's because you're a
cultures.
sub.
Well, yeah, technically, but they do it to other classrooms. It's like, I asked,
Oh,
like, are
they
you
do
just
that.
subs? They go, no, we do it to other ones. I go, what? So the norm that's set
And the
down,
kids say, "Oh, it's okay. He's my friend. He's my buddy." And it's like,
it's no,
not while you're in class. Yeah, but this is his lunch, and we don't have the same lunch. You have the same break time.
it's like, dude, yeah, this is not,
No,
this is
no, you guys
insane.
figure out another time.
Well, the whole structure too is set up so that so and so is going to be unavailable every fourth period. They're in Mrs. Johansson's English class. It's like, instead of, hey, can I go talk to Eddie about this thing? I want to, yes, but after you do, I need work. Deal. Yeah, I used to do that a lot. Yeah, you got 5 there, and I get the next 45 after
Yeah.
that. And that's a good tool because, okay, and they don't just do stuff innovatively in between the cracks of the rules.
So, okay, so mainstream, they tend to have a huge discipline problem.
They do.
And I'm not going to say that alternative programs don't as well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we told our students that if they,
Yeah.
I finally had enough of it because I was not going to babysit during fourth block. These kids don't want to be in here. Why are we forcing them to be in here?
Right.
They're not getting any work done. So basically, I said, if you have no work to do, you're off campus. You're gone. Or you can stay in here and you can work quietly. But it's not going to be a little coffee clatch where you just sit around and chat and do all this other stuff.
Right.
And so then I received a call from security and I received a call from the principal, and they said, hey, we have these kids and they are committing acts of thievery. Well, you need to come up here and look at these videos. And I came up and I looked and I said, yeah, that's them. They said, so what are you going to do about it? And I said, you know what? I'm going to play by your rules here. I'm on my prep. Are you telling me that I need to be watching these students on my prep? If so, then we're going to go back all the way to September and you're going to have to retroactively pay me for that time.
Mm-hmm.
And once we have that considered done, then I will address this issue. I never had another problem with that again.
I bet not.
But it took something like that for them to realize that my job is not to babysit the students, because they said, we need you to escort them off campus. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not escorting 40 kids off campus.
But how else are you going to control them, Tony? You need to control the situation and form it to your specifications. And if it doesn't, there's problems.
Exactly.
And you're right, there are, but it's your problem.
Well, it's not my
Not
problem, and I
yours,
got
but
tired of them
yeah.
telling me it was my problem.
God, it's crazy.
And my cohort was not very happy with me because at the time she was the director.
Mm,
And she said, "Where are the kids?" And I said, "I let them go." She said, "Why?" And I said, "Because this is my prep. And if they want to be here to work, they can be here to work. I am not going to force them to be here
mhm.
and babysit on my prep.
Right.
That's ridiculous."
Yeah, that's not
So, I mean, we had so little free time as it was,
exactly.
but they don't understand that in the mainstream. They think that that's all we do really is babysit. They think that okay, let me give you something.
That's true.
When we created the high school completion and credit recovery program, there was a kid who was, I don't know what year he was, but he came in and he worked for about 3 to 4 weeks to finish up a credit that he needed to do.
Mm,
He went out and he told everybody, "I got my credit for first semester. I'm done with my first semester credit." This is towards the end of second semester.
mm.
And everybody said, "Wow, you didn't have to retake the class." And he said, "No, I did it in credit recovery." And they said, "What'd you do?" And he said, "All I had to do was write a paragraph and then I was done." So his teacher heard this and filed a complaint.
Based upon what
What
he
he
said.
had told them.
Well, her sources are
And
stellar.
I saw this teacher
Yeah.
and I said, "Can we talk?" And she said, "I will not have you erasing any of the work that I have been trying to do with my students just so they can write a paragraph." And I said, "Yeah, I heard about that. Can we talk?" And she said, "I refuse to speak to you." The department chair came to me and said, "We have an issue." And she said, "I tried to talk to this teacher." And I said, "And?" She said, "I gave her all the materials and she refused to look at them."
Mhm.
And she's filing the complaint.
Contempt without prior investigation.
So she got all these other people on board with her.
Uh-oh. Time to look
And then the
silly.
admin called me in and said, "What's all this brouhaha?" And I said, "There is no
I'm
brouhaha."
not brewing any haha.
I said, "A student came in and bragged and didn't tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I caught wind of it. I tried to speak to her. One of my cohorts who's teaching the course and taught the kid tried to speak to her. Everybody's tried to show her, give her the materials, everything. And she refuses to listen. And they said, "Well, it sounds like your mess that you need to clean up." And I said, "No, it's yours. You're the administrator. Fix it." And
Yeah.
I turned around and I walked out.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I was, I know the listeners and all of you out there probably think I'm not very popular with administration, and that's probably very true. They're very happy.
And it's a good thing. I've come to own it as a true badge of character.
I'm the kind of teacher who goes walking down and goes into an
Uh,
administrator's office and shuts the door and sits down and says, "Let's
we
talk."
need to talk. Hold his calls. Hold her calls, please.
So, um,
Uh,
yeah, there's there's this real disconnect, and not one of them ever asked, "What are you doing?"
yeah, no one ever asked, is it true or what?
No, they don't even ask to see the curriculum. They don't even ask, "How are we doing this?" I had one tell me, "Well, now that we have this off and going, here's what we're going to do." And I said, "You will not F this up." And he looked like I'd slapped him. And I said, "Good, you heard me." And he said, "What did you say to me?" I said, "You will not F this up."
Yeah.
And he said, "What are you saying?" And I said, "We barely have a pilot running right now, and you're already talking about ways of screwing it over because one counselor wants to do X, Y, and Z with it. We need to be able to see what's working, where the kinks are, and then next year we will take it on a bigger study and run it with more students to see where else we need to
Are
take
you
it."
familiar with Chesterton's fence? It's a philosophical
No,
question. A man's
no, I'm
walking, a
not.
woman's walking across this vast prairie. You can see in all directions, and there's a fence right in the way. Fence goes forever. Can't go around it. So, what do? Do you just break it down? Just go through it? So you think about that, right? Chesterton's fence represents the reason why that fence is there. There's a reason that fence is there. You should probably know why it's there first before you break through it. You should probably understand what events came to put that fence there before you just break it. And that's the philosophical question. And people don't think that. They come across Chesterton's fence and they just blast through it like, well, I'm on a journey and this fence is here and I'm going through it. Why is there a fence in the middle of nowhere? You've never stopped to think about this fence maybe having a purpose, a reason. Maybe there's a good reason this fence is here.
It is a shiny new object. They don't know what it is. They don't know how to deal with it. I would go into EBIS meetings, effective
Yeah.
behavioral intervention strategies. It was a group of us. It was teachers, admin, and counselors. And we would investigate what's going right, what's going wrong, and we would discuss certain students and maybe some strategies around them. But I spent one entire day, not a day, but meeting, and I had
Weak.
some kids from publications going around asking people what alternative programs we actually had in the building. We had high school completion, we had credit recovery, we had CE2, which is community experience for career
Yeah.
education. And, and then we had a couple of others.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they went around, they asked the kids. The kids had no idea, except some of them did.
Yeah.
Some of them knew, some of them didn't. Ask teachers who I was very familiar with that I talked to on a regular basis. They had no clue. They had absolutely no clue. And then when they were asked what these programs did, they said they had no clue. They asked the administrators and they tried to answer it, but it was very clumsy. And so we were there and I said,
Mm.
this is where we are with our programs. How many of you actually know what we're doing in our programs? And they just stared at me and they said, we find this insulting because you're setting us up. And I said, no, I want you to be aware that we have these programs here. You keep trying to take advantage of it. You and a couple of you keep trying to change our programs to meet what you want, but we meet the needs of the students, not you.
Ugh, I can't believe I'm.
And they could not understand
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah. They couldn't.
um,
I'm defending a fence. God, I've never defended anything that held things back
and
or forward all my life, but it's true.
it's, I just found it so
Yeah. They
interesting.
don't
And so
know.
then I realized we had to do a bit of a PR campaign.
You know.
So we began one
Yeah. Yeah. You try to.
and that helps. But, so I think what I'm saying is if you are in alternative ed, you've got to figure out an effective way to campaign for your program for whatever it is. If there's a school newspaper, get in it, use it,
Mm.
get out there. Figure out ways. If you are there for the students and you're fighting with your administrators, as I said to somebody earlier today, you can always just go ahead and do what you're going to do and you can apologize later, or you can teach them and elucidate what it is that alternative ed is and why it is the way that it is. And it's always about students. It's always, and you're still meeting the same goals. You just go about it differently.
Mhm.
They want differentiation. This is ultimate differentiation.
Yeah.
You may be using UDL. You may be, Lord knows what you're using. I've been known to use probably 20 different strategies in the classroom at the same time, depending on what the students needed. Every single student requires a different
The
strategy.
same darn thing. I've done things.
And you know the same thing.
Yeah, I've done techniques and later found out, oh, that's the name of it?
Yeah.
I've just made common sense in the moment. Yeah,
Right.
like, yeah.
So what mainstream doesn't get, I think, is the fact that the students are the center of our programs. The students and their learning are at the center of our programs. We are around them as kind of a buffer from the out, in a sense, to keep them. Maybe that's not a good. Okay, the students are at the center. We are there. We orbit around them to try to keep them in their orbit.
That's true.
And keep them
that's
grounded.
Our purpose. Our purpose is the student, basically. That's
right.
To accommodate the students, teach them, mentor them. That's it. That's my purpose in life, basically, is to be a teacher, and that's what it is. Yeah.
And next week we're going to talk about juvenile justice schools.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think teachers in alternative ed need to be aware of is know your strengths, know your weaknesses. If you know and you are confident and you are competent in another subject area, you can teach that area. Look at the state laws. Read your state laws, get familiar with them, get involved with a state organization, get to know the person at the Department of Education who is in charge of alternative ed, speak with them, figure out whether or not they're actually competent, because they could be your biggest advocate. And start looking at other ways that alternative ed is active in your area and start going out there. Believe it or not, maybe it sounds like we're adding another layer onto you, but what we're actually doing is we are providing you with more support, and it's actually invigorating.
It is.
It's a breath of fresh air.
It is. And spread the word about what alt ed is and what it isn't. But geez, man, people don't
And
know.
while you're at it, make sure that you've subscribed if you're looking for the podcast on all the platforms.
From around the corner to the rest of the universe.
That's right. Okay. And so with that, I'm going to say sayonara, Philip.
Aloha.
And we will see you next week. Until then, bye-bye.